Evening, thank you very much for having me. I feel like I have to start by saying it's an absolute honour to be a part of this panel. Your stories are incredible. And just being a part of this event, I think it's an unbelievable thing to be able to share such important stories. My story, obviously, is being a female in a male-dominated environment. And from such a young age, I had to play with the boys. But I'll be honest, I've been this height since I was about 13, so I was obviously at a massive physical disadvantage from early on. But no, in all seriousness, I started when I was about 7 years old and just absolutely loved playing in the playground, playing with the boys. Even in my summer dress, that's what I had to do to be involved. But I was so lucky at that point that I joined the school football team with one of my best mates, Sophie, who was also a female as well. And she actually went on to play hockey for Scotland. So I feel like we had a similar, like-minded, strong-minded. She's now a medic as well. And I just felt so lucky to be able to go into that environment of an all-boys team with another girl. Obviously, academies, for all-girls academies, didn't exist when I was young. There was no such thing as playing professional football as a female, so I had to play with the boys. That led on to me playing for a local team called Hamilton Accies, which, again, actually a few boys in my year actually played for. But I have so many tough memories from that, from I guess not having changing rooms, not having the facilities, changing in, I'm not joking, like cleaning cupboards, just horrific environment but at that age, that's what I had to do to play football. I actually specifically remember a trip we actually played abroad in Holland, and I wasn't allowed to go because I was a girl traveling. But then they were like, if you go, a parent has to come with you. And thankfully, my mum ended up coming with me. But from such a young age, I think it was always so apparent that I was always trying to challenge the perception. I was always asked, what are you going to do when you grow up? And to be a footballer as a girl, you were almost laughed at. And I was always trying to challenge that perception. So much so that fast forward to age sort of 22, I think, it was 2013. And a guy called Tam Cowan, who's at that time probably one of the most respected journalists in Scotland, wrote an article about the Scotland women's team playing at Motherwell Stadium and how it should be torched after we just played in it. And I'm sat at home, as a kid with my mum and dad, and my dad's relaying this story because he was a journalist as well. And he was just outraged at the whole thing. But it was this constant thing of having to challenge that perception. There was this expectation on how women's football should be portrayed, when the reality is we were banned to play for 50 years. We were playing catch-up. There was this expectation that it should be as good as the men, you should be physically as good, you should be just as fast, when we were playing catch-up. We were trying to train as professionals while still being completely amateur, semi-pro, and then eventually fully professional. It wasn't until, I think I was 24 when I signed for Man City. Any Man City fans? Yeah. Yeah. And it was probably my first experience of having equality, I'll be completely honest. Man City built a new project from the grounds up. We were completely integrated in their facilities with the training programs, and we were treated as full-time professionals, and the gender wasn't really a thing. It was you were fully integrated in the club, trained and played at an incredible academy stadium, and that was my first sort of, okay, this is what it could be like. This is what, we've worked so hard to get the game to this point. Enjoy it. We deserve it. We've built so much coming to this point. I was 29 when I moved back to Arsenal. And, it's no fault of Arsenal's success at all, but it's almost been a victim to success. Because on paper, we're one of the most successful teams. We've won the most trophies. We've won the most leagues. But Arsenal hadn't really kept up with, I guess, the other teams that had built from the ground up. So it meant we had to have, it's also a massive credit to our leadership team with Leah Williamson, Kim Little, really, really powerful leaders within the team that raised important things. And it's also credit to Arsenal who welcomed those conversations. But this was the start of 2020 where those conversations started and Arsenal welcomed them, which was amazing and very rare within women's football. But I think you see it all over the scene in football. Canadian national football team recently just had a massive strike. Ireland striked as well. So it was almost like females in the game really understand our roles and responsibility in order to push the game. And I honestly think that's why we end up in team sports, because there's that camaraderie, there's that team effort to push the game forward and to be around like-minded people. And that's something that I massively value on a day-to-day basis, being able to have those kind of strong conversations. I think as a team, we were always battling the bigger picture, but we didn't really understand everyone's individual battles that we were going through. Recently, obviously, in my intro, you guys know at the end of 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which completely threw my world upside down. And it was a bizarre thing to feel that while we were going through these things as a team, I was battling my own battle. I got diagnosed on a Thursday. On the Sunday, we played against Brighton, and I scored. And there's a picture, it's probably my favourite picture of professional football that I've ever played in, but it's us celebrating. And it really defines the way we were as a team, I think, coming together not just for my own individual battle, but our teams and what we were going through and what we were fighting for, and how the club had really kept us all together as staff and players and the board and the chief execs. We were all going through it together, but I think that's the most important piece. I probably missed out on about 4 weeks of training, and then I got back into it, and I remember it forever. I got back into playing, and on a Sunday, it was just before Christmas, so this is a roundup of 2020. The last game, we played Everton. I scored, got player of the match. This is me having gone through my treatment. The next day, I had my last radiotherapy treatment, and then drove home for Christmas with a nurse's permission, by the way. And it just kind of was this incredible roundup of not my battle, but the team's battle, and going home and rounding up the year of what we'd all gone through. And it is about being bold. It is about speaking how you feel. And even from a health perspective, I spoke out, I think, pretty quickly about what I was going through, because I've always kind of appreciated the fact that no matter what you're going through on an individual or a team basis, it's kind of a respect for whoever's gone through you as players before, who's led the path. And it's not about you, it's about who's coming through next. But in order to do that, in order to kind of future-proof, you have to speak openly and communicate with your peers, and because the more chance that you're thinking something, they might be thinking something like-minded. And that's something I've found not just from a health perspective, but a professional perspective as well. A similar like-minded woman called Emma Mitchell, who's currently still playing in the Scottish national team. She's future-proofing maternity packages, which is another current conversation in football, which is just not touched on at all or enough. And I was lucky enough to still be part of the team when she was bringing her baby to camps, and it was just this really powerful moment of her having there. And we always kind of joked that if we're losing, just look at the touchline and there's a baby smiling. It was just amazing, and it was amazing for me, I guess, still being in the game at this age and seeing it go from amateur, semi-pro, professional to women having to leave the job or leave football in order to have children. And now you've got people like Emma Mitchell really paving the way for maternity packages and creating policies that aren't black and white, that really do individualize it towards the mother. And I think that's so important. You can't just think for what's now, it's what's next. Because women's football is just on this crazy trajectory where it's constantly improving. The exposure we get now is night and day to what we used to 10 years ago. But the thing for me, to end on, no matter what I've gone through, it's always been about talking. It's been about communicating, chatting to my friends, chatting to my colleagues. I've always found that whenever we've gone to the board or our manager or the chief execs or people higher up, the more we kind of spoke about it amongst each other, the more strength in numbers, I think, to put it politely or simply. That's how we always felt. So if you feel something, look to your left, look to your right, because 9 out of 10 times your mate or your partner or your colleague might feel similar, and it's so much stronger in numbers. So thank you very much for having me.